Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod, and this is Star Wars 7 by 7 So for those of you who occasionally wonder how it is that I do this every single day and have for nearly 4 years now, well, occasionally I get to batch episodes, but more often than not, I'm doing the episodes day by day by day. And yes, occasionally that does present some challenges like today when I'm running a 99-degree fever and every part of my body aches and head is totally blocked up and all that good stuff. But, this is what the show must go on looks like. And so here we are talking about Snoke and the First Order and the Last Jedi novelization by Jason Fry. Now, thanks to the magic of novel narration, we actually get to spend some time in Snoke's head just before he undergoes his unfortunate cutting in half. Unfortunate for him, of course. But we get to spend some time in his head, and he's ruminating about his own history and his history with the First Order and a little bit of the First Order's history too, as part of that time just as he's waiting for Rey to be delivered to him by Kylo Ren. And to start things off, he's thinking about the idea of interpreting the future through the Force, and he notes to himself that that's a very dangerous game to play and that there have been many who came before him who failed to learn that lesson and who died as a result. Snoke, of course, says that he learned that lesson very early on in his life when the galaxy was different. Ooh, whatever that means. We still don't have an established age for Snoke, but we're given to believe that he is rather old, very old, but beyond that, who knows? Anyway, he was obviously part of the unknown regions, lived in and around there. And as far as his history before running into the First Order, all we know is that there are legions of dead at Snoke's hand. That much, at least, we get for sure. As far as Snoke's power in the Force goes, well, he says that the galaxy's knowledge of the Force largely came from the unknown regions and came from long abandoned systems, and it's been Snoke's journey to explore those systems to discover the vast knowledge of the Force in those unknown regions and also the larger truths that are hidden within all of that vast knowledge. And not only did he use that knowledge to his own benefit, but also to the benefit of the former Empire, now First Order, because they had seeded the unknown regions with shipyards and storehouses and all of this good stuff. But according to his ruminations in the novelization, they were not prepared for the terrors of the unknown regions. And it was Snoke's knowledge and not their military might that allowed them to survive and thrive. And of course, he's not the only one who has promised or talked about helping the Empire or the First Order be able to deal with some of the terrors of the unknown regions. Thrawn, of course, was probably the first person to talk to Emperor Palpatine about the idea of there being really terrible things out in the unknown regions and that he could possibly help them understand what was going on out there. So now we have Snoke, and still no idea what happened to Thrawn after the end of Rebels, so don't know if he's a player in this anymore, but Snoke is the guy, and he's the guy who we're talking about here. So he also talks about how the First Order's evolution was more improvisation than master plan, and he talks about the people who had led the First Order prior to the point at which we meet them in the sequel movies. So it starts off with Gallius Rax, who we met in the Aftermath trilogy of novels, and then it moves on to Grand Admiral Rey Sloane, who we also met in the Aftermath novels, as well as originally meeting her in A New Dawn, the prequel to Star Wars Rebels by John Jackson Miller. Hearing some names, you obviously want to start thinking about timelines, so let's throw the other names in here that get mentioned. There's an Ormuz Opalin, who is mentioned after Rey Sloane, and Ormuz is described as a slippery political fanatic. And then Brendel Hux's name is dropped, and Hux is a name we're familiar with. Of course, he is the father of the illegitimate son Armitage Hux. That would be the General Hux that we know from the sequel movies. Brendel, for his part, is a former commandant of the Imperial Academy on Arcanis and was the guy who developed the training for the First Order stormtroopers. And if you want to try and put a timeline on this, well, okay, it's kind of difficult because there's still a lot that we don't know. One thing I'll tell you right off the bat is spoiler alert for Aftermath Empire's End. If you have not read that novel, then you might want to plug your ears for the next 15 seconds. But as far as the order of events goes, Gallius Rax was the leader of the Empire after the death of Palpatine, and he died at the end of Aftermath Empire's End. So 1 year post-Empire, that's when that happened, and Sloane took over. We have no idea how long Sloane was in command, and we have no idea how long Ormuz Opalin was in command. As far as Brendel Hux goes, we have Ugh, something, maybe, because what we know about Brendel Hux is that he was part of the crew that rescued and found Captain Phasma on Parnassus, and that was described as happening as quote unquote 12 years ago from the events happening in real time in the novel Phasma, but we don't know when the real time events of Phasma actually took place. We do know that it took place within 6 years before the events of The Force Awakens, because there was still a resistance that was still being led by General Organa. So that much we can play with. And Brendel Hux had been dead for a number of years by the time the real-time events of the Captain Phasma novel are happening. So basically, Armitage Hux was in charge of the First Order's military might for a decade at least, and probably more. So you would have to figure that Brendel Hux, all right, let's just throw a random number on it, was dead within 15 years of the end of the Battle of Endor, and also 15 years prior to the events of The Force Awakens. And so that doesn't give much time for Sloane and for Omi's Opalin to be active. It gives them actually about 14 years between the two of them. Actually, maybe I want to do my math a little bit differently there. I think it's closer to 15 years for the three of them, for Sloane, for Ormuz Opalin, and for Brendel Hux, prior to Armitage conspiring. Here's another spoiler. This one is for Phasma. If you have not read the Phasma novel, then play yours for another 15 seconds. But with Phasma and Armitage Hux conspiring to kill Brendel Hux, to assassinate him, yeah, I think we're talking about 15 years for the combined rule, roughly, of Sloane and Ormuz Opalin and Brendel Hux. And that is going to do it for the video version of today's podcast. However, there is an extra audio version where Snoke talks about Luke Skywalker and how he is a favored instrument of the cosmic force's will. And so I will talk about that on the audio version of the podcast as a bonus element there. That's at sw7x7.com/iTunes or wherever you like to listen to podcasts. But for now, it just remains for me to say thank you so much for watching, and may the Force be with you wherever in the world you may be.